Our next learning objective involves forms of business organization. Now, let's say you decide to start a company someday. What kind of forms can you select? I've done several of these in my own personal life outside of work. So we'll discuss some of those. What are the key forms of business organization? What are the related liabilities? Some questions to ask and factors to consider. What's the cost of creating that organization? How about the continuity? Is it easy to continue if you lose interest in the organization, if you're the CEO? How about who controls the decisions? Who has personal liability? And how are these various forms of organization taxed? So we want to discuss all of those things. Simple overview of these organizations. We have a sole proprietorship, which I have formed several of those in prior years. A business owned by one person. Well, at least I thought it was a sole proprietorship. I started a Rose Bowl pin business back in 1994. My wife saw the pins on the porch and she was not very happy. So all of a sudden I had a partnership with a limited partner. I was the general partner going downtown trying to sell the pins. My wife was a limited partner and she was not too happy. She was an irritated limited partner because she didn't want me wasting money on this other sort of stuff. And when am I going to sell it? And when are we going to break even? She asked me all these financial questions. What is our return on investment? I don't know. I haven't sold one pin yet. Those questions pop up. And then finally, a corporation. I was involved in a startup corporation out of the research park named Lycom Technologies. So that was very interesting. And why did we decide to incorporate? An incorporation is a business created as a formal legal entity, separate and distinct from its owners, a separate person, if you will. And then there's a new form called a limited liability company, of which I have several at the current time. And there are several advantages to that LLC. Sole proprietorship is several advantages. It's very simple. You just start it, basically. You use your own tax ID, your own social security number to report your taxes. You keep all the profits. That's kind of a nice thing. And you do have to file the information on your personal tax return. Disadvantages of the sole proprietorship are unlimited personal liability. So if there's a problem with your product, you can get sued. Limited lifespan. When you lose interest in the project or the product, company basically folds. Limited equity. The equity available or capital available to the organization is your own personal wealth. And stuff to transfer ownership if you have just a sole proprietorship. With a partnership, you may have two types of partners, a general partner and a limited partner. General partner is basically doing most of the work. Limited partner might just be staying in the kitchen like my wife did when I started that Rose Bowl pin business. Several advantages to the partnership. Very simple again. You just start it up. You can, again, use your own tax ID and Form 1040 to submit your tax returns. And the owner's share in the profits. So my wife and I decided that it would be a 50-50 partnership. Even though I was doing most of the selling downtown, she would be entitled to half of the profits. Some of the disadvantages, I have unlimited liability as a general partner out there pitching the product. My wife would be a limited partner inside the kitchen, and her liability is limited to her share of the business, her share of the investment. A limited life of the business, so if both parties are not interested in continuing, it folds, and it's fairly difficult to transfer ownership. A corporation, as I said, is a business created as a separate legal entity, separate and distinct from its owners. You can sue the corporation and leave the owners untouched. Advantages are public ownership. You can sell stock in your corporation. There is limited liability of the corporation, and very simple to transfer ownership. You just sell the corporation. Unlimited life of the corporation. So every time we start one, we want that business to last forever, and easier to raise cash and or equity if we need funding to do various and sundry projects. Strictly regulated in many cases, can be difficult, expensive to form. In our case at Lycom Technologies, it cost us $200. We went downtown, got an attorney, and she was very fair to us. She understood that we really didn't have a lot of money in a startup business and was very kind and started us up for $200. The primary disadvantage of the corporation is the income that you make is subject to double taxation. You're taxed once on your profit before taxes, and you're taxed a second time if you pay dividends, or your stockholders are taxed a second time. So double taxation is the major disadvantage of the corporation, but it has many advantages. When the attorney incorporates you, he or she will prepare a document that includes the articles of incorporation and the bylaws, including the bylaws, how the business will operate, when we'll have annual meetings, how you regulate your existence. But inside the book, the actual document or book that the attorney prepares for you, is the corporate name, Lycom Technologies, the owners, Dr. Jay Patel, President and CEO, Dr. Sangwoo So, VP Engineering, and Greg Pierce, Chief Financial Officer. Intended life is forever. We want Lycom Technologies to stay in business forever. It is still in business under another name called Optelios at the time. We had to change our name under threat of lawsuit because some other company claimed that we took their name or borrowed their name. And so we pivoted and changed the name to Optelios. Business purpose was to make fiber optic attenuators, which shut off light and let light through a fiber optic network 1,000 times a second, our president would tell us, 1,000 times a second. The president had a PhD in physics, a PhD in electrical engineering, and a PhD in material science, so I trusted that he knew what he was talking about, although I was skeptical. Can you really cut off light and let light through a fiber optic pipe, which is usually a piece of glass, 1,000 times a second? He insisted we could. And the number of shares to be issued, our attorney, whenever she started a new company and developed articles of incorporation for that company, she would always issue 10,000 shares. That was just kind of a blanket number of shares that worked well over the years for her. And so I'm thinking, well, we're not getting paid in this startup. This is nice, and maybe I'll get a third of the shares that were issued. LLC is kind of a fourth new and evolving form of business organization. As I said, I have several LLCs currently that I run. It's kind of the hybrid of the partnership form and the corporate form. It gives you the limited liability advantage of the corporation, and it's operated and taxed like a partnership, so it's not doubly taxed. So LLC is a new, evolving. Some notable companies that started as LLCs, PepsiCo, Nike, IBM, BlackBerry, originally LLCs and flipped to a corporate form once they got more corporation-like. What type of organization? In review, what type of organization is owned by one person? Simple, easy to form, unlimited liability. That's called a sole proprietorship. What type of organization has two or more owners and unlimited liability for the general partner is a partnership, limited liability for the limited partner. And which type of organization is a legal person, separate and distinct from its owners, and has limited liability that is known as a corporation. Know those various forms of organization in case you decide to start one someday.